Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen and students of this wonderful law school. My name is Melody Wilkinson, and I'm very proud to be the chair of the GPSolo and Small Firm Division. And first of all, I want to welcome you and thank you for coming to our exciting program that I am very happy to share with you. I know that some of you are still getting situated, but please enjoy your lunch, grab your lunch at the back, and sit down and listen to this very exciting program that we have. But before we get into the program, I do want to thank our sponsors who have made this possible. And I'd like to thank the U.S. Army, and I would also like to thank the Judge Advocate General Corporation for their support of this program. And you're going to be hearing from Colonel Guarini in the next few minutes. And again, this program wouldn't be possible and all of these wonderful lunches that you're enjoying without the support of the U.S. Army and the Judge Advocate General program. So thank you very much for that. Now, today's panel is going to give you very valuable insight into being a solo and small firm practitioner. I'm just curious, how many of you all are first years that are here? Raise your hands. Okay, we've got a fair number, about half. How many are second year students? I see a little pocket over here. And how many are third year students? And we have some third years right here. So we run the gamut in terms of students, and that's great. It's never too early to be thinking about your career as a solo and small firm lawyer. Some people will go right out of law school, and some people go into that just a little bit later, and you're going to hear some wonderful insight. Our program is going to be moderated by TJ Martin. She's going to be given the introduction of the panelists when she speaks. But I also do want to mention that GPSolo and Small Firm, we have some wonderful resources for you. Check out our website. We're a division within the American Bar Association. That's the largest national organization of lawyers in the world, and we are all very proud to be a member of the ABA. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to our sponsor, and I would like to introduce Colonel Guarini and give her the microphone before we hear from our moderator. Thank you so much, Colonel Guarini.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome and thank you for being here. I just wanted to take a moment to introduce ourselves. There's quite a few of us here from the Army. If you're not tracking already, at 1:30 p.m., there will be the Army Court of Criminal Appeals. It's right here in the Great Hall, and they will actually be conducting an appellate court hearing. And that's a chance and opportunity for you to be able to see a little bit into our system and also certainly talk to folks and ask them any questions about the Army JAG Corps. This is Ms. Allison Starnes-Anglia. She is my Deputy Chief of the Recruiting Office. I am the Chief of the Army Judge Advocate Recruiting Office, and we're super excited to be here. In the back, we have a couple of folks. Major Kilgore is the Field Screening Officer for your law school, so he is primed and ready to do on-the-spot interviews today because our 1L internship, summer internship program is still open, and third-year law students who are looking for employment, we are taking your applications as well. I have been in the JAG Corps for 20 years. I learned about the JAG Corps when I was in my last year of law school. I went to law school in Boston, and the field screening officer really did a great job of explaining to me the benefits of the Army JAG Corps. I am an active duty officer, but we also have the reserve component, which means you could do it part-time, or National Guard, which means you could do it for your individual state as well. And so I encourage each of you, each one of us has a story. We certainly have a story of one, why we joined, and two, why we stayed. And so I think you're going to hear the themes of teamwork and camaraderie and really being part of a mission bigger than yourselves. We have all sorts of law practices, including criminal justice, military justice, administrative law, contracts and fiscal law. We have some specialties such as environmental law, patents and trademarks. We also have legal assistance, which is when we provide one-on-one service for our service members as well. So a broad variety of practice areas. Probably one of the most consequential practices of law that you can do, a large law firm that's been in place since 1775 when George Washington had a judge advocate with him during the Revolutionary War. So again, I encourage you just to talk to people, to find out their stories and see if it's something that appeals to you as well. Allison?
Thank you, ma'am. Hi, everyone. I'm Allison. I'm one of the Army's many civilian attorneys. And before I took this job, I actually worked at a law school career services office. And I met your career services office team this morning. And they were telling me just how incredible all of you are and how excited you are about your careers. And it's showing here today that you're here to attend this panel and learn more. And so thank you for the opportunity. You will find, as Colonel Guarini said, the Army has a very diverse practice world. There is a lot to do and a lot to learn. I am the deputy of the recruiting office, so I should be the continuity for you and your school. If you forget these names, my name should always be on the website, so come find us. Again, like she said, we're here to tell you why we took this job, to tell you why we stay, and answer any of your questions. So if anyone's interested in that civilian aspect of the Army JAG Corps, come talk to me. I'm happy to talk to all of you. I'll say it's a great job. It is the intellectual exercise without the physical exercise. So please come talk to me if you have any questions, and enjoy the panel.
Thank you very much, and thank you so much for saying a few words. Now, before I turn the microphone over to our moderator, there are just a couple of people in the audience that I do want to point out. We have our law student division. He sits on our council. His name is Daniel Gall. He is a law student, I think from Loyola School of Law, so we are very happy that he could be here and join us. So he is your representative and your voice to council, and also all of these programs are possible because of wonderful staff. We have Kim Koshin back there. She's in the white. She's our executive director for the GPSolo and small firm, and she makes everything happen within the division. So we're so grateful. The one thing that I neglected to say earlier that I should have, and that is we are not only fortunate to be, of course, the home to solo and small firm lawyers all across the nation, but we're also home to the military lawyer, and we treasure our bond that we have with the military. So thank you for those insightful remarks, Colonel Guarini. And at this point, I am going to turn over the program to our moderator, TJ Martin, who is in the city office here, in the city attorney's office here in Arizona in Phoenix, and she will lead it from here.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Martin.
Again, my name is TJ Martin, and I am the Chief Assistant City Attorney for the City of Phoenix. And you may ask, why is she here, since she's not as small as solo? But I did, in fact, have a small solo practice in Texas for approximately 4 years. I'm going to pass the mic and allow our panelists to introduce themselves. So, starting off.
Can you guys hear me? Okay, good. I'm Danny Ortega. I am from Phoenix, Arizona. Have been practicing law here for a very, very long time. I do not disclose my age because they'll say, well, you started way back. How does that apply to us? Well, I'll tell you how it does when we get there.
Hi there. My name is Sean Berberian. I'm a corporate lawyer here with my office in Tempe, Arizona. I've been practicing for 25 years. Starting with a litigation background in the initial years, and then transitioning into a corporate transactional practice.
My name is excuse me. My name is Burgess Raby. I also practice in Tempe, Arizona, and I have an international tax practice. You don't need the hand help. You guys help. Yeah. Well, but is it going to squeal at us? It shouldn't. Okay. All right. So back. Burgess Raby, go by Burr. Tempe, Arizona. Have an international tax practice, which is tax law is a fun area because you get to do a lot of different things. Stick your nose into things like crypto, be in court, meet people from around the world, and answer phone calls at 2 o'clock in the morning from your clients. So.
Thank you so much, Burr, Denny, and Sean. So I think I've got a series of questions that I'll ask the gentleman, and we'll reserve some time towards the end for those of you who may have questions. And I think the first thing that would be important to share, and we'd like to hear from each of you since you have very distinguished practice areas, what caused you to go to start your own practice or do a solo practice?
When I graduated from law school, it was my desire, my dream, to work for community legal services. It was providing legal services to the indigent, to underserved communities. And I went to, and I got exactly what I asked for. I went to work for community legal services. After being there for 1 year, I didn't feel like I was serving the purpose that I wanted to serve, in large part because of the administration of the program. And so a good friend of mine, her brother was a lawyer. And she said, well, maybe you can sit down and talk to him and get some ideas, something like this, okay? Get some ideas about what you can do or where you can go. And ultimately, he not only told me what I could do, but a week later wanted to know if I wanted to come work for him. That was just all happenstance. It just happened. And so I started, and my recommendation to you today, I started with another solo practitioner. I was 1 year at law school. I knew then that I didn't know anything when it came to, analyzing cases, reading the case law and all those things. But in terms of the practice of law, it was a little different. From that experience, 2 years later, I went out on my own. I grew from being a solo practitioner to 8 lawyers and 22 staff, my firm. And a 12,000 square foot building right down the street here on 3rd Avenue in McKinley. I then decided that that was not for me either. And we'll talk a little bit about administration. We'll talk about public relations. We'll talk about a whole bunch of things that go into the practice of law that is not just law. Went with a partnership, was a pretty reputable personal injury firm for another 11 years. That firm broke up, and I'm now back to being on my own the last 12 years, and I can't tell you how happy I am to have come back to where I started.
Sean, what about you?
I started my practice in San Francisco at a national law firm doing business litigation there, and so my early years were all with very large national firms. I had no intent on starting my own practice. I just concentrated on just lawyering, being as good as I could at being a lawyer. And once I became a partner at a national firm here in Phoenix, I then the books were opened, and then you see the details of the economics of the law firm. And I subconsciously immediately knew once I saw the books that I was going to leave. And that's because I decided what you have to give to that big firm wasn't worth it. I could do better on my own, I thought. And I made that decision having zero book of business. I was an equity partner with 8 years of experience, and I just thought this is long-term not going to work because you sacrifice a lot being in that environment. And whether or not it's worth the return, you have to decide for yourself. And I decided that wasn't worth it. So I joined 2 other lawyers, and we started a new firm concentrating on business litigation. We were all roughly had the same experience with doing business litigation, and that gave us a good platform to start with, that experience, but with very little book of business. And I certainly don't regret it, one bit. Although I've been since then, I've gone in-house, and I've been general counsel to a public company. I later left and went back to my own practice because I had concluded that having that independence was important to me, and having the flexibility and being able to control my economics was important to me. And we'll get into the balance between your personal life and business life, and that's something you at a small firm, really in any practice, you have to actively work on that issue, and it's something I've paid a lot of attention to. That's sort of my brief journey into it and why.
I started my own practice because I was asked to by a client. I started off with the second largest firm in Phoenix. Coming out of law school, made income partner there. Was told that my area of expertise was perceived to be oddball deals, and the firm didn't know how they were going to market that. because the tax department at that firm did three deals for every one that the corporate department did. They wanted to focus on large deals. So I drafted a lot of documents for a lot of people who said, I want it this way. And we did it that way. And so I was told, though, that wasn't really marketable. I said I want to do international tax work, international work, which I'd been doing, all the firm had at the time in Phoenix. And they said, well, we'll never do that in a local law firm. That'll just be the big eight. If you don't know the big eight, that was what we used to call the big accounting firms that are now down to four. So I took myself off to the world's largest law firm's Los Angeles office. They had just merged with a new firm and opened the LA office. I went to work there for 3.5 years, found that I liked working for entrepreneurs, and I guess I like doing oddball deals because entrepreneurs tend to like oddball deals. And Phoenix, the Arizona legal market, is an entrepreneurial market in that it's not dominated by publicly held companies. And our whole tax department spent about 3 weeks trying to figure out the meaning of one sentence of the Internal Revenue Code for a publicly held company that had 100 tax people in their office. And, that was what we were used for. I was more used to sitting down and talking to people about what they wanted to accomplish. So my client he stayed my client even when I was in LA, but he was someone I'd started working with when I was in Phoenix. And he said, well, look, I need someone who's going to be my lawyer. And so I was general counsel from 1993, outside general counsel from 1993 to 2009 for a home builder. But at the same time, I had the freedom to build an international tax practice here in Phoenix, or in Tempe.
Thank you, guys. Unlike them, I was a mom and decided that I was going to stay at home and had a friend to call and ask me to help with some legal documentation. And at the end of it, she said, well, how much do I owe you? And I was like, I never thought about charging you. And so that was the start of my small practice. I think, Sean, you mentioned a little bit about work-life balance and kind of juggling a practice, being a solo. Can you share a little bit more for the attendees about what that's like?
Sure. Working your way up at a big firm, and in many other environments too, but I mean, in particular, the stereotype of a big firm is they're going to grind you because you are the workhorse. The big law firm economics requires that junior lawyers work a lot of hours on more senior people's clients' files. And, going through that experience, although I actually had where I was at, the firm I was at, I was happy with who I was working with. And, I liked the folks. I also ultimately didn't like, what it meant for my life long term. If I was going to grind like that, that meant I was going to have to sacrifice personally, family and personal time. And part of the decision to go out on my own was to create the flexibility to respect my personal life, because long term I wanted to make a lot of money, but I also wanted to enjoy my life along the way. So I do actively think about that to make sure that I have that right balance. There are times where there's nothing you can do about it, that you've got to kill yourself. And when I was in-house and took a company public, those are the times where I was working 80 hours a week. And but you also have to think about how long you can do that, and you've got to have the time for your mental and physical well-being, and whatever it may be for you to get your release in a healthy way. It's like I felt like I needed to prioritize that. So it's something to this day I do concentrate on doing. I mean, I have a practice that gives me enough flexibility so that I can do that to make sure I have time with family. Being able to remote work is certainly very helpful with that, because it gives you a lot more flexibility with family and for personal things.
Burr, I heard you talk about that you often work with international clients. So we've got different clocks going on. How are you managing those to balance your work life?
Well, I guess I have a more old school attitude on it. If the client wants to talk to me at 2 in the morning and I'm representing them, I talk to them at 2 in the morning. It just means setting an alarm. But I also am very fortunate. There are lots of people who don't like practicing law. I actually enjoy the practice of law. That's one reason I was able to do a solo practice, and one reason I wanted to do a solo practice, because in a large law firm, you, as has been mentioned, you end up spending a lot of time dealing with a lot of administrative things. I would occasionally disagree with the administration, and occasionally I would get in trouble because I would voice that disagreement. And sometimes I would do it in a way that poked fun at the people making the rules. There was a partner meeting at my law firm in LA about firing me. But fortunately, some of the senior partners agreed with me and against the executive director. But overall, I like practicing law, and I think you have a lot more time to practice law than if you're in a big firm. Because when I went to LA, I was the highest billing associate, and I was spending 125 hours a month billing, and I was used to spending 160 minimum up to 180. But that's because we had lots of meetings, we had lots of people to talk to, we had lots of emails, and we had just started, email just started being part of your professional day. And just a lot of unnecessary, or related more to the firm being profitable and moving ahead and achieving its goals rather than trying to serve the clients.
Thank you. So I kind of heard, Danny, you speak earlier about building your business as a solo practitioner, going from a large scale, a larger small firm to a solo. For Danny and Sean, how are you building your book of business now? How are you identifying your clients?
First of all, you should all know that I was raised here. I went to grade school here. I went to high school here. That becomes extremely important if you want to be out in private practice on your own. We pay little attention to our relationships before we became lawyers or before we were, out in the business world. And I was just very fortunate. I had a very big family. I became a large civil rights activist in the Latino community at the end of my sophomore year in high school. Met a lot of people, not because I ever wanted to be a lawyer or not because I was doing a book of business, just because I had a conviction to something that was extremely important to me in terms of the kinds of changes that I thought we needed to make for our community to prosper. Within that, I met a lot of people. Within that, people knew who I was and what my convictions were. Within that, the relationships were developed that I don't know that I could have developed the way I did. And that went through high school, through undergrad at ASU, through law school at ASU. All of that followed me. And little did I know that that was going to be the biggest part of my success. Now, I'm going to back up a little bit by telling you that if you're doing things strictly for transactional reasons, there's a whole different approach there. If you're doing these things to get trust, if you're doing these things because your community means something to you, if you're doing these things because social change is important to you, people learn to trust you. Lawyers who are always transactional, even within their family, okay, have a tougher time. Now, if you can go work for a big law firm where, you know, the transaction where your community isn't important, the transaction with your family isn't important in terms of business. I'm sure your family is important. So I want to ask a crucial question. How many of you are from or raised in Phoenix, Arizona? If you open up a practice in Phoenix, Arizona, you're ahead of those who didn't, okay? Because at the end of the day, and I have a list here, it's a matter of friends, family, clubs, organizations, social media. local outreach, opportunities to educate, and that's important to me. As a lawyer, you're going to be given opportunities to give presentations, to talk about certain subjects of law. Great work as a lawyer, or your commitment to working hard, whether you're a lawyer or not, people will see it. And then ultimately, I think it's extremely important that, and I learned this the hard way, that if you can work for somebody, particularly in a small firm, for a few years before you go out on your own, you can develop all of this in the process. Going out on your own right away is going to be extremely tough. I mean, these two lawyers here are successful because they were somewhere where they learned the business. I'm successful because I was here a long time, and when I decided to get into the business, I already had things I didn't know I had. Okay, in terms of the people that I knew and that would trust me with their work. So the question becomes, typically for me, and especially when I speak to students, what made you want to be a lawyer? Or how did you develop this interest in being a lawyer? Well, in those activists, one of the very first meetings that I went to, somebody asked me in high school, in sophomore year, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I said, well, I want to be a Spanish teacher. And they said, why? Because I know 2 languages, and we'll get into that in a minute. I know 2 languages, and I think I'd be a good Spanish teacher. Well, where'd you pick this up? Well, my 2 role models were my Spanish teachers. I mean, so, in the school that I was going to, and he said to me, that's a noble profession. I encourage you to follow your dreams, but did you ever think about doing something else? All in one discussion. And I said, no, what else is there to do? He goes, well, did you ever think about being a doctor? Did you ever think about being an engineer? Did you ever think about being a pilot? By the way, his degree was in aeronautical technology. That's a pilot. And then he left for last. Did you ever think about being a lawyer? And I said, well, why a lawyer? I know the other things I don't want to be. Right? I made my mind up right away. He says, well, because the kinds of things that you're getting involved with today, lawyers are really important. That's how my decision was made.
Sean, you've got a different client group representing corporations and businesses. So how do you develop those relationships and build your practice?
So, thank you. I don't think I've ever actually gone out and marketed myself. I've done no marketing in my career, so I'm a little bit unusual. And that only works because of the practice that I'm in, and I think I'm a damn good lawyer. So the work that I've done has developed into other work for those people, and then for people they refer me to. My entire career since I left a large firm has been business that comes from referrals, from lawyers, from parties, both on my side and on the other side. I can remember early on where an opposing party contacted me, and he said, and it was about a matter that I was working on at the big firm. He said, I know you're the one who did that case, and I like the way you handled it because we prevailed in the dispute against him. So he hired me. I didn't market to him, and I didn't market to anybody else. I just did my job. Now, if you're going to start your own practice from day one, you can't do it that way. You have to be an entrepreneur, and you have to be a lawyer, and you have to work on both always. In a way, because of my history, I cut my teeth with very good lawyers who trained me. I became a good lawyer, then went out and became an entrepreneur, and I had to start from zero. And I was economically in a position where I could make that transition. So if you're going to do it from day one, you always have to know that you have to be an entrepreneur from day one, and you're going to have to be thinking about, how am I building my book of business? How am I being strategic about it? And at the same time, working on your skills as a lawyer. I didn't have the guts to start my own practice from the start. I had 2 good friends in law school who did, and I thought they were crazy. One of those has... They are. You have to have the guts to do it. There's something to it, and that's being an entrepreneur. And many people do very well doing it, but And the other thing to think about is in my practice areas, because I'm a business lawyer, we don't market the same. But if you're in a different sector where you have to constantly market, a lot of your business will be about marketing. One of my big clients where I'm outside general counsel for is a legal marketing business, and it's a national business. So I can see the marketing industry and the data technology that goes into it. I did none of that and had very little exposure to that before. But depending on what segment you're going to get into, you have to be thinking about that. New technologies come up where you have to become familiar with them. Like, for example, social media related marketing. This is totally foreign to me, but other industries, you're going to have to be that good on social media. It is industry by industry, or I should say sector within the industry is going to determine a lot of what you've got to do. And it's a fun journey, but you're going to wear two hats.
So building a practice is not only the practice of law, but learning how to run a business. Burr, do you have any tips on the operational side of the business? What skill set or what should a young attorney starting their own practice consider from that perspective of operating the business of running a law department?
Yeah, that box on your desk that you paid a couple grand for, your computer, should not be thrown out the window, although you will want to do so at least once a week. They are frustrating, but they're absolutely necessary. I don't know how the rest of the panelists feel. I couldn't do what I'm doing if it weren't for computers and these horrible little devices that are driving our world nuts. So it's technology, and it's getting a grounding in it without getting immersed in it, unless you want to become a technology lawyer. And you can become a technology lawyer. But I have a great IT person, and I have expressed to him, especially early on, that if I'd wanted to be a blippity blip blip IT person, I would have taken computer science. I didn't have time to go back to law school and do that. So I think one of the big challenges is getting a handle on how you're going to work your day and what are you going to have to help you get that done. Whether it's technology, whether you're going to hire someone, whether you're going to rely on your mom coming in, whether you're going to have your sister filing things, it's all a question of how are you going to get those things done, which is echoing the point that was made by both of my co-panelists. It's very hard to do this off the bat. I was an adjunct professor at the U of A from 1995 to 2019, and I was always frustrated by the fact that in law schools, we teach people how to think like a lawyer. That's the primary job. We do not do a very good job in American law schools of talking about such things as how do you set your hourly rate? How do you keep a timesheet? You may learn that when you're interning, but a lot of the business aspects of practicing law, which, as was said by Sean, the minute you walk out the door and say, hey, I'm opening my own law practice, you are both now an entrepreneur and a lawyer. And the difficulty is balancing those two, because they are rather completely different mindsets. Because especially as you're doing technical work, and we all are doing technical work regardless of the area, but as you do, especially in international tax, as I sit down to write a memo, I'm having to think about how do I communicate most effectively what the client needs to know about the area that they're asking about, not about how I'm going to sell them on another service or something else. And yet the entrepreneur side of you said, well, I wonder whether I can get more work out of them. So there's an ongoing struggle between those two. And one thing about entrepreneurs that I learned early on, at least from the tax standpoint, if I can tell an entrepreneur, you've got a 50% chance of winning, they're going to go with it. And why? Because they've been told most of their lives they couldn't do what they wanted to do. People say, oh, you got to do that in a big company. You got to do that somewhere else. So in that sense, I guess I'm an entrepreneur because I rejected that advice and eventually opened a international tax practice in Phoenix, in the Phoenix area. I've always been in Tempe. But you've always got that balance, and you've got to have the discipline to say, no, I'm not going to tell you there's a 50-50 chance. You have to understand what the ramifications of the not winning or not prevailing or not taking the right position are. And you've got to have the discipline to do that, because the client's going to argue, well, I don't need to know more. Just tell me I've got a 50-50 chance and let's go from there. And Sean, you snorted. I think you may have had that experience with some of your corporate clients as well. So,
advertising, technology, filing, these are all things that small practitioners, solo practitioners need to consider. Looking back over your career and initially starting, would each of you give the audience an idea of what you wish you would have known when starting out? What would have been helpful? Danny, what about you? What do you wish you would have known early on?
Wow. That I was going to be a businessman? I never considered that. Ever. I didn't know that I was going to be in business, a businessman, or run a business. I thought the practice of law was something different. And once I saw my mentor, who ultimately became a Superior Court judge, it's a good thing I stayed in good graces with him. But my mentor, run his office and the kinds of things that he was doing, I wish I had known sooner and prepared myself for that. It was kind of just learning by doing. I knew about the rules of ethics. I knew about trust accounts. I knew about things of that nature. But I didn't know all the other things with regard to employees and the responsibilities you have to employees and the kinds of paperwork that you have to do and the background that it just goes on and on. So I wish I had known, and if any of you have the opportunity before you get into your own practice to learn more about business and what it means, go to seminars on the business of law practice. We're already into the law. Now you got to get into the business of law. And so I wish I had known that before. Not that I got into any trouble necessarily because of it, only because I was spending too much time doing it. And I had a practice where I just got sick of, running a firm, getting clients for the firm. It was just, I was practicing law. I was trying cases and doing all of that with a staff, an administrative staff of 5. I'm not talking about me doing it all, but I had to keep on them to make sure that things were done the way they should have been. So I think that if you are interested in practicing law, learn about business.
What about you, Sean? What's one thing you wish you would have known?
I'll give you 2. I graduated law school in 1999 in San Francisco. So if I would have done something all over again from there, I would have gone to work for Google. The more practical answer is I would have built my book of business right from the start, because I concentrated on just lawyering. For the first 8 years, I didn't build a book of business. And what I realized, no matter where you're working, if you're in the private sector, you have to build a book of business because the book of business is your power. So if you're starting off with your own firm from the start, you have no choice but to build. If you're at a big firm or a mid-sized firm, you do have a choice, and you're encouraged to work other people's business in those early years. And what you don't realize is by not having your own business, you're actually giving up a lot of power, because in law firms, your book of business is your power. It's how you negotiate. It's how your compensation ultimately, is measured in all of those environments. So it makes you attractive within your own firm. It makes you attractive to other law firms. So your book is what really gives you that power and gives you the flexibility to do ultimately what you want. So if you start off at a big firm and say, my goal is to go to a small firm or start my own practice in X number of years, you should be building from day one so that you know that you can move as soon as you want to move. I learned that the hard way because I had to build from nothing after 8 years. But so that's the one thing that's always stuck in the back of my mind. And so you don't want to learn the lesson the hard way. You want to be prepared from day one.
What about you, Burr?
Well, unlike Danny, I'll tell you somewhat how old I am. I graduated from law school in 1982.
Young man.
At which point in time, many of you may not have been alive in 1982, but in 1982, if something came in on a fax machine, that was a big deal. You had to answer it now. If something came in by FedEx, you stopped whatever you were doing because someone had spent money to get it to you overnight. Wow. I didn't have a computer on my desk until I moved to Los Angeles in 1990. And I wish I knew more about technology. I also wish if I could go back to 1979 law student at Notre Dame, I would have taken intellectual property courses. Because whatever we do these days, sooner or later, you end up with IP, whether it's know-how, which is not protected, copyright, almost everything we touch, and a huge component of international tax law is the transfer of technology and how you use the technology. And I wish I'd been smarter about technology, but it wasn't something that I was aware I wasn't until I opened my own law firm, and I had to figure out, do I go on the skiing trip I'm supposed to leave for now, or do I fix the darn printer, which didn't print out the thing I've been working on all day that I told the client would be done before I left for work on the end of the week. So I'm not sure how you get those skills other than trial and error if you're practicing law, but I sure would have tried to spend a lot more time on it than I do now. And I don't have a website. I also am not big on social media. Because my clientele comes to me by referrals, and that's from people who, I communicate with on a regular basis. So, anyway, echoing a lot of things that were said previously.
Real small.
The other asset that I had that I didn't know I had is that I was bilingual, and that brought me a ton of business.
I think what we've heard is agility, right? To be able to move through time, concepts, different practice areas, building a book of business, technology. Those have been some concepts. I even heard Danny make a comment about bar complaints. We didn't talk about that because we don't want to scare students, but as a smaller solo practitioner, that's something that you constantly have to be aware of and maintain some insurance to protect yourself. So we're not going to scare you. With that being said, I just wanted to throw out some of those things that we've kind of talked about. Most of you, you've heard is over 125 years of experience here. Many of us practiced before there was significant technology available. Like Danny, I'm not going to tell you my age. Just know that when I started out, we didn't have computers either. So there's a lot to be said just about being agile, knowing what resources are available to you. I think those of you who are participating in today's discussion, so you've got a leg up. You've already identified a resource available to you. Never be afraid to network. Get your elevator speech, is what we call it, available. So when you meet people who you are interested in what they're doing, be sure that you get that. I think with the time, I wanted to open it up for questions for the panelists, if any of you have any. And if you don't, I'll let them talk more. But does anybody have any questions for anybody in particular? Or just general? Yes, sir.
I have a general question for the panel. So a few of you have moved around a little bit. What advice do you have for people who aren't going to practice either where they went to school or where they grew up?
If they want to go into their own private practice, it goes back to starting out with somebody else, and taking the opportunity not only to learn the practice of law, but to learn the business of law, and also for you to get involved in this community. I mean, if you don't have a big family, if you don't have any activities that you've been involved with, if you don't go to a certain church, I mean, those were my assets. And so I think that, if you're new, practice, get into the practice and into the business of law. And then in the meantime, meantime, try to, not because you're in business, but because if you like it, nothing worse than being in a place you want to be. Start talking to people and start introducing yourself and have, I'm a lawyer and I do X, Y, and Z. If people ask you, I'm not one of those that flaps out a card the minute I say hi to somebody. I just don't like the transaction of practicing law.
Absolutely, right? Some people aren't even using cards anymore.
No, the other day somebody grabbed their phone. He says, "You want my card?" And I'm like, "Well, I get it now, right? It's a digital card that you can give somebody or whatever it is." But I think that you, in that situation, what are your interests? What do you want to do? What's your interaction with people? How important are you to this world that you live in? And from there, you can make the connections that are important to you and that can lead you into an opportunity to practice law and get clients.
Bert?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would also say, I think a couple of things you have to be. One is humble. You don't know everything. Lawyers, sometimes lawyers in large firms particularly, think they know everything. They're successful financially, and when they walk in a room, everyone listens to them. You've got to be humble, and a big part of being humble is realize you can learn something from everyone and listen. I think communication specialists, if you ask any communication specialist, they will tell you, we don't spend it, most of us are terrible listeners. And because we want to talk, we want to inject, and I guess we're doing that on this panel. But you've got to listen to what people are talking about. And then if you're non-transactional, you can deal with them. If you're transactional, you say, oh, gee, I've got a great answer for that. You want to give me a call tomorrow, my hourly rate is blah, blah, blah. That's not listening. That's thinking about you first. So be humble, listen to people, and be involved. Get involved with whatever you want to do. You will meet people, and people will meet people. I've done a tremendous number of talks over the years. Written some, but mainly been on panels or programs. I don't know where a lot of my work comes from. Someone will call me and say, I was referred to you by so-and-so, an accountant. All my work comes through referrals. I was thinking about it, I don't think I've ever taken a client off the street, if you will, because I'd rather work with someone who's already got an accountant or an attorney working with them. I'm a solo. I don't want to handle every aspect of someone's international tax and tax work. I want someone I want to do rifle shot rather than buckshot. So humble, learn from others, and listen to others, which is the way you learn from them.
Any other questions? Yes, sir.
How long did it take for your solo practices to compensate you at a level that was commensurate with your large firm work? Like, how long was it before you were kind of in the money and comfortable?
I'll take a stab at that because that was a big part of the transition that I made. It probably took me, it was probably 2 to 3 years in that window of time of going from zero to being comfortable for that transition. And it was something that I was certainly concerned about, but when I made the transition, because I knew deep down that long-term I didn't want to continue to sacrifice for somebody else's equity, if you will. It was like, there's no looking back. I'm going full steam ahead. But also looking back on it, I think I could have done things differently in that I could have been more aggressive and more active, which kind of relates to the previous question, which is, if you're building a book of business, because you're an entrepreneur, you have to be scrappy, you have to be constantly being creative and thinking about developing that business. And that's that hat that you have to wear. Another side note, which I don't want to get lost, is my general tip, which is as a young lawyer, you need to find a mentor. If you're going to be a first-year lawyer with your own practice, that means you don't have the resources around you. So that means you need to go out and find a mentor. Anybody and everybody can find a mentor. Like literally, if you look in resources and find other lawyers in the practice area you're wanting to practice in, you will find people. Literally cold call them, and you won't you'll be shocked. People are willing to help. If you can find the right mentor, it'll make a huge difference, because one of those big differences of being alone is general or day-to-day issues, whatever it is, being able to have somebody to bounce an idea off of is huge. You need to get second opinions. Even if it's 5 minutes, hearing from somebody else is huge. Don't be afraid to do it. You have to do it as a solo. I had a great mentor at the firm where I became a partner at. To this day, I still am in contact with him. He just very recently retired. And he was a great mentor to me. And also, even in my first year of practice, the big firm I was at, I had a very good mentor. It was a brief period of time, but she was a very good mentor. She was the managing partner of that office. But those people will be key in your career, because you can't make decisions. You can't be a great lawyer in a vacuum. You have to be open to input from other people.
I think there was a question. Did I miss a hand? Yes, ma'am.
My first question is it possible for the panelists to put up their contact information names so we can ask them some questions or connect them on LinkedIn? My second question is, one of the panelists mentioned that when they went to their law firm, their particular area of interest was not something that the law firm did a lot of, it was the tax, and how did he get experience and that would prepare him to move on to his law practice?
Go ahead.
Well, I think we all can probably share. Provide you an email address is easy. The firm was nice enough to send me to a conference on my area, because there was enough of it at the time in Phoenix, international tax work, real estate primarily, foreign persons selling real estate in Arizona, that they were willing to send me to a program that was a 4-day, I think it was a week-long program in New York, which I promptly then, once I got back from that, I started applying to firms in California and I was lucky that, as I mentioned, the international firm in Los Angeles had just opened their office. They were about 1.5 years into it. They were looking for people to take a role, and so I was fortunate, got an interview and got the job there. So I actually, just went and found someone who was doing international tax, knowing that I probably needed more training. And after I went through the conference, I was pretty sure I needed more training, and that I might as well get paid well to get the more training rather than getting an LLM in tax, and was flexible enough to be able to move to LA.
Mentorship, education, and technology resources, finding out what's available. It's 1:00. For those of you who need to leave, I want to be respectful of your time. If any of the panelists are available to stay and answer questions, and those of us who can certainly will. I did see another hand over here, but I just wanted to be respectful of those who may need to get to another class or some other obligation. And thank you so much for joining us today and listening to what we had to say. We will figure out how to share contact information for everyone who's interested in that information.